Hi, I'm Malika Lim Eubank of Hyper RPG, and today we'll be talking about the role of Questmaster in Quest of Yore, a new tabletop role-playing game from our friends at the Op, based on Disney Pixar's Onward. The Questmaster is in charge of setting the scene and creating the conflict, but this isn't a bad thing. All good stories have conflict, and you're just trying to create a fun and interesting story for your fellowship. The ingredients to an exciting quest that you create is a happy medium of challenging adversaries and inspiring world building. Let your fellowship enjoy this world you've created. Today, we're going to talk about how you can make this an enjoyable experience for you and your players. The Tome of Quests has a dozen quests, a prologue that acts as a tutorial for new players, and even color-coded guidance for narration and information to give to your players. The Advanced Player's Guide contains rules for playing. This is all available to you with the box, but we'll be assuming you've read those books and you're looking for some additional tips to help you get started running your quests. Before you even start playing with your friends, it might be a good idea to talk about some sort of routine. For instance, every other Saturday, we'll meet in my basement with snacks and sodas and play Quest of Yore for 3 hours. You obviously don't have to stick to the schedule, but you'll find that you'll really want to. You'll be leaving your fellowship with great cliffhangers in your story, more on that later, and they'll be begging to play again as soon as possible. So establishing a regular schedule and adjusting when needed can be really helpful to ensure you keep it rolling. Once you've decided on your first session, show up with all your necessary tools. Keep the Advanced Player Guide in the middle of your table so your players can refer to it anytime they need. Give each player some sort of miniature that represents their character. This could be anything from one of the provided minis to a cheese puff you found underneath your couch. Something to represent a player's position when referring to challenging scenarios. Players can share dice with no issue, but it will be a smoother process if each player has their own set of dice. Several sets of dice are included in the box, but if you need more, check at your local gaming store. Make sure every player has their roll sheet, a pencil, their gear up items, and their starting tokens for Grit, Heart's Fire, and Lion's Will. Once all that is in order, you're ready to start your quest. When narrating the quest for your players, have notes or even copies of your players' roll sheets handy. It's going to be important to think of the intricacies of each player's role and weave those parts in where it helps. Maybe you've noticed the players haven't been working together and assisting each other very much. So you could pose a challenge to one of your players that highlights a weakness of their role, really requiring help from another player. Something like, Imric the elf. Lightning strikes a tree and you hear a crack and creak of a large limb above your head as it snaps, falling straight to you. You'll need to quickly exert to dive out of the way. You pose this challenge to Imric, who has a low quickly and a low exert to encourage help from a teammate. It's also really important to keep a character's concepts in mind. If you're having trouble persuading players to take a certain course of action that you'd really like them to take, you can bring their concept in play. Maybe you're hoping the players will take up an adventure to help a woman navigate the dark forest outside of town. But the players don't seem interested. You notice one of Imric's concepts is that he was separated from his parents at a young age and is still searching for them. You might then modify the woman's plea to say something like, "Please, is there anything you can do? My son is lost in there, and I don't know who to turn to for help." Imric might then feel inspired to help as it relates to his own backstory. Keeping the players' roll sheets nearby and using them to your advantage will help you guide the players, and it will also help maintain a meaningful and impactful story that everyone will enjoy participating in. Next tip, dice rolling. You don't need to roll for everything, but also dice rolling can be really fun. Get a feel for the pace of your story before deciding to make your players roll for a minor thing. A great question to ask yourself before making a player roll the dice is, would they be able to achieve this action without question? If so, there's no need to roll the dice. Not every encounter needs to be a major story point, and not every success or failure needs to have a large impact. Imagine your players are walking through that dark forest from earlier. You've walked for hours, Imric, hoping to reconnect this woman with her lost son. Your stomach begins to growl. Your last meal was breakfast. You see some red berries in a bush at the base of a tree to your right. You know these to be elderly berries. You can eat them with no harm, and they're a great source of nutrients, but half of these berries have a slight discoloration, a hue of red that's hard for the elven eye to pick up on. These discolored berries turn those who ingest them into an elderly person for up to 2 hours. You've just posed Imric with a fun opportunity. He could ignore the berries, ignore his hunger, and press on with his current mission, or he could investigate the berries and attempt to eat a safe one. If he succeeds, he might eat a berry and feel fine. If he fails, he might take a chance and eat a berry anyways. Maybe this berry turns him into an old man, which could create some hilarious encounters, especially if Imric's player wants to actually do an old man voice and play the part. You've created a very minor encounter that gave a player an opportunity to play the game. It had no real effect on the outcome of the quest, but allowed the player to make a choice and roll some dice in an instant where succeeding makes the player feel good at investigating, and failing lets the player do something silly and fun. Another tip for a quest master is to keep in mind what the characters you're playing would know. Sometimes it can be fun to have one of your made-up characters or adversaries echo something one of your players believes or play to one of their strengths or weaknesses. But don't overdo that. What I mean is, maybe Imric has a very weak brawl and an adversary encounters Imric and immediately starts brawling because you know Imric is bad at brawling. Firstly, you never want to seem like you're trying to beat the players. You're trying to make a fun world for them to play in. Secondly, the adversary that you're playing wouldn't know that Imric is bad at brawling, so it creates an unfair advantage for you. Play these adversaries as if they have no knowledge and they learn things as they naturally would. Maybe after a round of combat, Imric casts a spell and hides in a bush. Then it might be obvious to the adversary that Imric doesn't want to brawl. Think of what knowledge your created characters have of your players and think of how they might have gotten that knowledge. This will help keep the world realistic and fair. Another tip for your quest masters: take notes of the things you make up on the fly. You'll probably write some things down before your quests of scene settings, characters you want to come into play, challenges, and trials. Keep these notes in a somewhat organized manner for reference. But you'll also want to keep notes of the stuff you make up. Your players might have a specific cue that you gave them that helps them remember or that they really loved, and it will make the experience so much more fun when you can keep everything consistent. Maybe Imric wants some info about the town he just arrived in, so he says. I approach a nearby townsperson and ask where the nearest smith is. You didn't have anything planned, so you make up a character there on the spot. You say, a suave young satyr with a stylish mohawk and a gold tooth says in a high-pitched voice, I'll take you there, but it's gonna cost you. Your players end up creating a relationship with this character and can't wait to interact with this character the next time they come into town. You'll want to remember his name and the way he looked and spoke and some tidbits of interaction so that there's something for you to work with when you play with him again. These minor details can make the world seem so much more fleshed out than it actually is. Another tip. The play session will eventually have to come to an end every time you play. Say you're playing on Saturday at 3 p.m., but you have to be done by 6. It's 5:45 and there's no way you'll get the players to where you want them to be. That's okay, the session can pick back up where it left off, but practice the art of a good cliffhanger. Make the players want to come back with a little tease for what's to come. Maybe you wanted Imric to get all the way through the forest to find the woman's lost son. But Imric and his fellowship are not even close to being through with all the adversaries you had planned. Plan a way to wrap up your session that gives you a nice entry into the next session while leaving players on the edge of their seat. You hear the cry of what must be the woman's son. You all run into the darkness towards the sound, calling out after him. As the sound gets closer and closer, you make out the shape of his body in the distance. As the boy turns around, you see it's not a young, crying boy at all. It's a goblin, as a dozen more goblins poke their heads from the bushes and grin their yellowed fangs. You realize you've fallen right into the goblin's trap. See you next Saturday at 3. You were able to end the session while keeping the story very alive. You can bet your players will be so excited to come back and play as soon as they can to take out those goblins and find the woman's son. The final tip for Quests of Yore, and certainly the most important, have fun with your friends. You are in control of a lot as a quest master, and you can really ensure your players enjoy the game by being positive and invested. If you care about your quests you've crafted, so will they. If it seems at any point a player might not be having fun, there's no harm in talking to the player privately. Maybe they're just confused on a rule. Maybe a situation you posed them made them uncomfortable and you can avoid doing something similar in the future. Maybe they just express their joy in different ways. The game can be stressful in high-tension situations, but that doesn't mean it isn't fun. Remember that good conflict is what drives this game forward and makes heroes out of your fellowship. Don't aim to beat your players, aim to propel them into the stuff of legend on their challenging, fun, exciting, and custom-built by you Quests of Yore. Be sure to like and subscribe to Hyper RPG for more geeky fun videos, and check out our other videos on Quests of Yore. See you in the next one.